after the ceasefires, Avila, when we started getting down to see how we could construct real talks and real negotiations, one of the good things that happened was the Women's Coalition came together at the end of 95 or early 96. You might just give me a bit of the context of how that happened and what happened.
Sure, yeah. Well, the thing about the Women's Coalition is really sort of brought together a range of experiences that have been going on right through the Troubles. So it brought together women that have been active in the trade union movement, so had experience of negotiation, people like May Blood, Eileen Weir, people like that. It also brought together people that were community activists, that have been working in those communities, that have been on the sort of the cutting edge, if you like, of the impact of the violence. And then the women's movement itself, where it had been obviously sort of advocating for changes in legislation around domestic violence and so forth. So it actually brought a lot of skills together. And obviously also people that have been involved in the civil rights movement, going back even further. So whenever we obviously saw the ceasefires and the potential opening up of politics, we basically sort of said, well, look, now's an opportunity to try and broaden politics, because one of the things I think we found was violence narrows politics, and also because everything was so focused on the constitutional question, and there were huge economic and social and rights issues that had just gone by the board. Basically, we very deliberately said what we need to carve out a position for ourselves quickly. So what can we do that would be different? So I mean, I think we launched our manifesto with a picnic in the park or something like that. We used open top buses to go round and to make it much more that this is not a standard political party. This is something different. And then the line we took was, look, everybody else is fixated on the border. There's all these other issues, so we're not.
So when you come in, then, I mean, the election was a success for you.
Yes.
I mean, considering that you launched the party tongue in cheek, maybe 6 weeks out, and then you come in. But not alone did you get a group elected, you got a formidable group of people who had vast experience in many different walks of life, maybe not cut and thrust of everyday politics, but certainly a lot of other things. When those talks started, after the election, you come in, what was the sense? I mean, did you come in with the view that you were going to be a group that would influence everybody, or obviously you had people who came from different backgrounds, but you seemed from that 96, even before Sinn Féin entered the talks, but you seemed to come in with the view that we're going to make a difference here by getting at everybody and challenging everybody, which was very different to. I always remember the meetings where we come in and people were sitting at various corners of the room, but you've made a habit of Women's Coalition of sitting with everybody and moving around with everybody, which some people might think is a normal thing to do, but it wasn't very normal.
It wasn't. And I think that came from the backgrounds of the community and the trade union movement. I mean, both those are based on relationships. And we also obviously from the word go had said, look, we are reflecting a divided society. So we're having co-leadership. We're having Monica from Nationalist community and Pearl Seeger at the time from the Loyalist community. So, and we also we had reflected on the Anglo-Irish Agreement and the period from the 86 up to the ceasefires, and reckon, look, the philosophy of sort of maximising the centre doesn't work. You're actually going to have to bring in the people that were sort of excluded if you're going to get a peace agreement. So we were very clear that we had to talk to everybody. And I mean, that wasn't easy for some of our members, who did have relatives shot and things like that. And certainly I remember she's actually talked about it, Pearl saying she found it really difficult to sit down with Sinn Féin, but did. On that principle that we had to talk to everybody. And we actually worked out a bit of a strategy. We actually nominated people. So Pearl was a smoker, right, Pearl? You go out and stand with the smokers outside and pick up intelligence, or somebody else, get to know Seamus Mallon or whatever. I knew John Human anyway, so that you were actually bringing in the intelligence from those relationships as well as building the relationships. And with people we didn't know, I mean, we became very close to Davy Irvine, for argument's sake. Davy and his wife would come for dinner. So you were also building almost like, where you could, some sort of a social connection in terms of sort of saying, look, let's try different ideas. The other benefit we had, because we were cross-community, we had collective meetings of our members, and we knew the red lines of people coming from a Republican or a unionist position before we met the elected representatives from those positions. So we had a sense of saying, okay, this is a red line here, or there's a bit of a grey area here. Let's see how we can push the grey area. So it wasn't just, hey, we love everybody, basically. There was a bit of a strategy to it. And again, on one of our principles was inclusion. So that meant that we had to meet everybody. So when Sinn Féin weren't allowed in because of the breakdown of the ceasefire, we met them behind the scenes consistently. Now, I'm sure they were briefed with their people as well. But we made a point.
You were officially,
of actually meeting them. And I think that's sort of, and similarly, whenever the PUP and the UDB were put out at times, we met them outside. So, and indeed, whenever by 1997, when some of the loyalist prisoners were going against the talks, Monica and May and people like that went into the prisons to talk to them.
And, I suppose as we got into those discussions, of course, there was this three-strand approach, and there was demilitarisation, decommissioning. Those issues weren't, they were important to everybody, but they weren't the core issues. But if I recall, you were very strong on parity of esteem. You were very strong on the equality agenda, on the changes of the criminal justice system. You had experts in these areas that the other parties hadn't. I mean, you had...
We did. Yeah.
Maybe you just give us some of those issues.
Yes, well, I mean, for example, we also stuck with the forum for, as Monica used to call it, misunderstanding and whatever, where actually a lot of the SDLP and Sinn Féin had pulled out of it, again on the principle of inclusion. And I remember actually the forum talking about the parading issue at the time, which obviously, was very sharp, was quite toxic at the time. And Barbara McCabe, who's now passed on, but I mean, Barbara was an academic, one of our team, and she talked to other people, in the law department, and they drafted a bill around parading. And I remember Mo Molam taking it and sort of waving it at her civil servants, like, the Women's Coalition can draft a bill, why can't you not draft a bill? Anyway, but so we did have that, in my position with the Community Foundation, I was managing the European Union funding for all the political prisoners groups. So I knew the issues, and I actually had a grant advisory committee made up of 2 representatives of 5 paramilitary organisations from 1995. So you knew the issues that were there, and you were able to bring that information in. And then for some of the areas, perhaps where we weren't as strong, perhaps some of the economics or whatever, we very deliberately then organised seminars and whatever to bring in expertise. And I think one of the things that was different coming in from the outside was we were prepared to ask questions and say we didn't know. Most politicians can't say they don't know something. And then they say the wrong thing and then they get stuck in it, basically. If we didn't know, we said we didn't know, and say, well, who does know? And bring them in.